Welcome to the Out Agenda, coming to you on archive.kpfk.org. I'm Rita Gonzales. Well, this week we'll have another segment of RADIO QGLLU. Our hosts are Mario Novoa, Eduardo Archuleta, Lydia Otero, and myself. This week we'll be discussing Lydia Otero's new book, LA Interchanges, a brown and queer archival memoir. Mario, take it away.
Welcome to the RADIO QGLLU podcast, the show that takes a deep dive into what the queer, gay, and lesbian LATINE community is talking about. I'm Mario J. Novoa. In today's episode, we're talking about LA Interchanges, a brown and queer archival memoir with our very own Lydia Otero, the author of the book.
I'm Eduardo Archuleta.
I'm Rita Gonzales.
And I'm Lydia Otero.
Lydia Otero was one of the founders of Lesbianas Unidas, LU, in 1983, formed the core group that organized the Latina lesbian retreats, and also co-chaired LU for several years. In 1988 and 1989, Otero served 2 terms as GLLU president as the group launched Bienestar, a gay Latino AIDS project.
After leaving GLLU in 1992, Dr. Otero acquired a PhD in history and was a tenured professor in the Department of Mexican American Studies at the University of Arizona. Their past publications have explored contested landscapes, La Calle, spatial conflicts, and urban renewal in a southwestern city, focused on a 1966 urban renewal project, which targeted the most densely populated 80 acres in Arizona. In the Shadows of the Freeway, Growing Up Brown and Queer, in 2019 merges personal memoir and the historical archive to investigate the environmental racism they witnessed during their childhood and the unresolved intergenerational trauma that remained. Otero's book compilation, Notitas, Select Columns from the Tucson Citizen, was released in 2021. The columns were written by Alba B. Torres, one of the most formidable resistance fighters to the destruction targeting Tucson's barrios in the late 1960s.
Part working class memoir and part documentary history, LA Interchanges follows Lydia Otero as they move from the homes of family members, dance floors, work sites, and Los Angeles' organizing spaces in search of brown and queer belonging. Through photographs, archival documents, and compelling storytelling, Otero weaves a gripping, passionate narrative of personal becoming amid the political and cultural currents of 1980s Los Angeles. Grounded in the philosophy that the personal is political, Otero portrays fellow organizers and strategists exploring previously unimagined avenues to address the needs of brown queers. The book traces Otero's transformations and blossoming sense of self, which often felt constrained by the binary gender assignments of the time.
Lydia, I get to ask you the first question.
Okay, go read.
How did you feel compelled to write and share this book now?
So, as you mentioned in the introduction, I had written a previous memoir about growing up in Tucson, about living near the freeway that was responsible for destroying the barrio in which I lived. That book also discusses gender norms of the 1960s, my mother's constant efforts to convince me that I was a girl, and the school district in our city who had nothing but low expectations of students, of its brown students that look like me, and who insisted, of course, that I wear dresses. So I had to wear dresses up till the 1972, almost the year that I graduated high school, which for me was very traumatic, right? So when I finished that book, it ends when I graduate high school, and I go off to college, and so I knew when I wrote that book that I couldn't write about all my life in one book. I knew that there had to be a follow-up to that memoir, because geographically, that book is located in Tucson, right? In the home where I grew up. And so my life later is that I moved to LA. So that had to be a separate book, and there had to be a book about LA and about me moving to LA and about my adventures in LA that you are all a part of, including Mario. And so, yeah, it had to do with geography. It had to do with a different theme. I mean, in growing up brown and queer, it's about me coming of age and having a consciousness as a young person. And in this book, I'm an adult, and I know that I'm queer. I knew it even as a child, but I know that moving to LA, I needed to find other queers like me. It was a compelling need just to be around people like me. I knew they existed in LA. I don't know what told me that they existed in LA. And when I say people like me, I was just looking for brown queers, because I had my family, especially my father, had a history with alcohol, and I didn't want to go to bars to be queer. I wanted to meet people like y'all that had a political consciousness and wanted to be active and more public about their queerness. And that's what drove me to LA. Plus, I also love disco, and I wanted to dance in big clubs. And so that was part of the reason. So I wrote this book as a follow-up to my first memoir. And the timing was not, I know that the timing was very arbitrary. I just wrote it. There were times when I focused on it a lot. There was times that I put it aside and it didn't go anywhere. I'm not the type of writer that wakes up every morning and writes and is very dedicated to this daily practice. I write when something interests me, or when I feel like I've worked out an issue in my mind, and that's how it's going to flow. And I completed it recently. And, I like to finish things, because one of the things that I'm guilty of is sometimes not finishing things. And I wanted to complete this book. So then that became the goal. I'm really close. I have this book. Let me just finish it. And maybe that's a lot of information, but Rita and Eduardo, you know me, I'm a hard worker. And one of the things that it entailed was just really focusing and working on this project and seeing it to its completion. And now I'm here talking to y'all on Radio QGLLU about LA Interchanges.
Was there anything that you left out of the book that you'd be able to share with us?
Yeah, it's interesting that I wrote this book separately because I thought I had a lot to say, right? And I do, but I couldn't include everything. And when, for example, I want to make sure to write about me, my life in LA when I got here, and my life in LA before I moved here. I spent almost every childhood summer in Los Angeles, and up to age 16. So I already had a sense of the city before I moved here. And I wanted to talk about my tia Mincy and my tio Mando, who every summer I went to stay at their house in Boyle Heights. So I wanted to tell that part of the story. In terms of not including things, maybe I don't talk so much about my dating history, because maybe some people will feel that's lacking, but I think that I really wanted to focus on my transformation as a political human being. And if I'm talking about myself as that transformation, I think I focused on that. Surely I mentioned people that I was in relationships with, but and a lot of times, and you all were with me on this journey, we didn't go to bars. I mean, if we had a fundraiser at Circus or a fundraiser at the Plush Pony, a fundraiser at Kitty's, we'd go. But once we got together as GLLU, I wasn't going to bars. So I'm not leaving out too much. I mean, I write about some of the bars some of the clubs, because I really didn't go to bars. I mean, some of the gay men's clubs that I went to just had a pool table, and it was like, wow, this is boring, just a pool table. I went to the Catch. and I went to Peanuts, and it had to be big, and it had to have a big dance floor for me to bother going. But I never went to a bar by myself. I always went with a posse, and I always went with other people, because bars to me, or clubs, were socializing. It wasn't a place to look for potential partners. I want potential partners that I met that like me, that had some sort of consciousness. So maybe, Eduardo, that I didn't write too much about. And to be honest, the last 2 chapters are about GLLU. And I didn't write so much about GLLU because it's my story in GLLU. And I think everybody in GLLU has their own story. And I didn't want to take responsibility for telling the comprehensive story of GLLU. Because even the story that I do tell, I'm sure that there's people that somebody that was in GLLU says that wasn't true. Well, this is how I think about history in general, is that there is not one story. It's like all these different stories that come together and tell this story. I mean, this is just one version, my version of what I think happened. I'm not calling it the truth. My story, because this is an archival memoir, I do use minutes and documents to support what I'm saying, which made me more confident. And plus, I'm trained as a historian, right? So I'm used to looking at archives and using primary documents to support what I'm thinking. So yeah, I didn't want to tell comprehensive history. I don't want people to think it's the comprehensive, definitive story of GLLU, because it's not. I think that add to that the Unidad documentary that was just released, that's a version of GLLU. In that, that's not absolute truth too, because I have issues with some of the things portrayed in the documentary. Some people will have issues with my memoir, and that's the reality of it. I think that's good for us. And that'll form that. And if you have an issue, you feel your story is compelling, write your own memoir, tell your story, find some way to tell this comprehensive story, because I think that's one of the reasons that I wanted to write this memoir, is put it out there and maybe evidence or inspire or to show others that this can be done. People, oldsters like us, we should be thinking about how we're going to preserve our stories. And we're thinking about how to preserve other people's stories. That's not problematic to us. And in fact, we want to do that. But are we thinking about how we're preserving our own stories? Because growing up in the 1960s and early 70s, like you and Rita, we were often told we weren't important. We were often told that what we did wasn't important. So some of that is really ingrained in us. And I think that we have to shift that and start thinking differently.
Well, since I don't get to read about your past relationships in this book too much, I know you touch on it a little bit, but who should read this book?
Yeah, I thought about that because I didn't write it for this large audience. People say, who are you writing the book to? And, I'm writing it for young people who perhaps are interested in a history that doesn't make it into like regular history books, certainly, but we're not even in the history of the queers in Los Angeles most of the time, right? I'm also writing it for young people because I want them to get this sense of transformation and possibility. When I arrived in LA, I was very much into the Chicane movement, and I wanted to be part of that. I wanted to support Cesar Chavez and the United Farm Workers. And but the way I had to do that was interesting because I had to make mistakes along the way. I had to work in jobs that had no future. I mean, it just didn't happen miraculously. I mean, I had to take it. It involved a lot of things that we would have categorized now as bad decisions. And I think that's true of everybody's life. I mean, and I wanted to portray a story of a person that, like, at the end, I think I'm a very good activist. At the same time, I didn't start off that way. I started off just like just exploring, asking questions, learning how to make things, and then getting to be a construction electrician in construction was part of my inner desire to make things, to build things, to be part of the building and the making. And I've always had that need to be part of building and making something. That's what I'm doing now with my books, is I'm still making and building things. It's just books now.
This is Mario again. You were recently featured in the Unidad documentary, which you mentioned a little bit ago, and it's currently playing on PBS. You were also featured in the One Archives Foundation's recent exhibition Together on Air about working on this very program during the early years. What does it feel like to revisit all your stories and accomplishments?
Yeah, it seems to all come together, right, Mario? It seems like I wrote this book and it simultaneously with the Unidad documentary. I mean, the timing is rather magical, and it's 1983, and GLLU is getting a lot of attention. The first meeting that we had, and where I met you, Mario, where Roland called us together to talk about the possibility of a documentary. I remember at that meeting saying, "Hey, y'all, I want to tell you that I'm already writing a memoir. And I want to make it clear that you know this, because I want to make sure that you don't think that I wrote a memoir because of this documentary." And I just wanted to be real crystal clear around it. I also wanted to make sure that people didn't feel I was capitalizing or on the visibility that a documentary would bring me in my work. So, and that's just me. I'm very careful. I don't want to take credit for anything I didn't do. And but I was already in the process of writing this. All of this coming together, it's interesting. It's very, I don't know, a cosmic intervention almost, it seems like. Maybe my readership has been expanded because of the Unidad documentary. I went to a fundraiser here in Tucson just 2 weeks ago, and there's nothing that I don't wear anything posted on my chest. And I was meeting people, and one woman says, "Hey, you were in the Unidad documentary." And I was shocked because, it's in Tucson. And I said, "Yeah, I was." And she says, "Oh, I got to take a picture with you because I want my family to see that I was with somebody in the Unidad documentary." So that was a great moment, made me feel great. And, like, there's some sort of notoriety to being in the Unidad documentary. And certainly, I think that more people are going to be interested in LA Interchanges because of the exposure I got in the Unidad documentary. But I didn't sit and plan it that way, is what I guess what I ultimately want to say.
Well, to steal a little bit out of the title, Interchanges, right? You have like a multimedia exhibition of your story and your work. So you have a book, there's Radio QGLLU, which you're a part of right now,
Yeah,
and there's the documentary, and then there was a One Archives
yeah,
exhibition. I mean,
yeah.
it really does encompass so many different community spaces.
Right.
And I have a couple questions in regards to just even getting through the writing of the book. So many of us, I think, we hear stories and people say, "Oh, I have a story to tell. Maybe one day I'll write a book." But you've written several books. What is the process like to write a book and then to publish the work?
I used to have a dissertation advisor who would tell me, "Oh, students come in here all the time," and they said, "Oh, give me advice on how I can write my dissertation because I'm having a hard time getting it started." And she said, "Well, I just told them to start writing." And it was like real basic information. But yeah, it's just start writing. Just start writing what you think. As you start writing, the ideas start to flow and say, "Hey, this idea can really interface well with this." And eventually you just put more words on a page. There's a lot of editing involved. LA Interchanges was harder for me to write because I'm writing about my personal transformation, then I'm writing about my political transformation, whether it be lesbians of color, whether it be Lesbianas Unidas or GLLU. And then I'm also writing about my work as an electrician. So then I'm changing sites within Los Angeles. So that was real hard to write. Okay. So then I'm writing, okay. And then this happened in GLLU. But then I put this, then I break that section up. But at that time I was working, say, at Universal Studio City Walk, and I was doing this project, and the King Kong broke down, and I was picked to go help fix it. I mean, it was an exciting moment for me. And then I have to take break and then go back in political life. Now, some people might see that as challenging. I loved it. I love to solve problems. And that's what I do when I write. And I love to figure out what works. I love putting things together. It's like building blocks, but it's on the page. So I think that just giving yourself a chance and doing that. I know a lot of people have told me that, and Mario have asked me, how do I get started? You start writing and they don't like that answer. I think they're looking for something deeper. And there are people who keep talking about writing things and maybe they can't do it. And for some reason, they can't do it. I know some people like that who just can't do it. But I like the challenge. I like what I said earlier, to complete it. Should I feel? Sometimes I think I should feel a little bit self-conscious that you all get to learn so much about my life. I mean, Eduardo and Rita, you read my first book. You get to read about my relationship and with my mother and how sometimes we bumped heads, and it's personal information. So I wondered, shouldn't I feel a little insecure? And I'm 68 years old, and it's like, I'm not going to be on this planet for much, much longer. And what do I have to feel self-conscious about? If someone relates to it, that's a good thing. I'm just going to keep going, and I have a project that I'm excited about now, and maybe too, and too, when you said write, somebody asked who you're writing it for. I'm not writing this to be on the New York Times bestseller list, and I'm not writing it to get more money or to make more money. I'm just really have fun writing. And I think that maybe right now in this time, I'm writing things that people are interested. Come on, it's all about intersectionality, about voices that have been previously marginalized. So it's like the perfect time for a writer like me.
So I do have a follow-up question about the publishing and distribution of your book, right? I bought my book, which I have here. Proud to say that I have it. I got it yesterday and I ordered it through Amazon. What's that process like? And also, can you tell us about the picture on the cover of the book? It's you, and for the listeners, it's Lydia on an overpass of a freeway somewhere in LA. Can you talk about that picture?
Sure. So that picture is very special. Yeah, it's interesting that you ask, because it's very, I don't know, is my life like that? Like that, it's just like, who can tell? Who knows? I'm very blessed. I'm certainly very blessed. So at the beginning of this year, I had a different cover. I had talked with my book designer, and I said, oh, this is the cover that I want. It was more of a mosaic. And then I talked to Christopher Anthony Velasco, because I was looking for photographs of two women that were part of the Latina Lesbian series that Laura Aguilar put together. And we all know, maybe in this RADIO QGLLU, people know the influence and the importance of photographer Laura Aguilar. I mean, she was incredible and she was gifted. So she had taken pictures of these two women I wrote about in my chapter 4, Cindy and Raquel. And I asked Christopher, do you have any photographs? And he quite couldn't get who I was asking for, because, he doesn't remember all the women in the Latina Lesbian series. So he sent me some outtakes, and he says, well, I'm going to send you some outtakes. They might be in this roll of outtakes. And it just so happened that the picture that made my cover was an outtake. So when I saw that photo, it was like, wow, this is perfect. It's like Laura took this picture of me in 1986, knowing that in 2003, I'd be looking for a cover photo. It was just magical. I was awestruck. I was like, I mean, how lucky am I? Because I think it's the perfect photograph for a cover. for this cover. And I'm very thankful to Laura Aguilar for taking that photo. And it's kind of trippy to think that it was an outtake, because I can only think of the other outtakes that they must be just really inspiring and beautiful too. So Laura Aguilar's work is still underexplored and underappreciated. In terms of publishing it, I started a publishing company in 2019 here in Arizona. I picked the name Planet Earth because I wanted a unifying entity in the world that didn't have borders. So it's the planet where we all belong and that welcomes human beings. And the name wasn't taken, and I registered the business in Tucson. And I work with professional typesetters and artists that I had met through the University of Arizona Press when I did my first book. When I did my first book through the University of Arizona Press, they assigned me a typesetter. They assigned me all these people, and I just asked questions. How do you do it? Why did you put this here? And what do you want to convey by this? And I asked so many questions, and I learned the ropes. So when I left the University of Arizona, I knew how to do it. That's why I started my own press, because I knew how to do it. Now, Rita and Eduardo, remember, I used to put together Unidad. I used to put together the anniversary programs. I used to put together the programs for the retreat. I've always been one of those people that puts things together. So now it's like I'm putting together books, and I find that all very engaging. Also, by having my own press, there's no gatekeeping involved. I can just do what I want to do and say what I want to say. There's advantages to that. I don't have to run my books through somebody else and and them tell me, well, right here, you have to talk a little bit more about this. I mean, I just want to do it, have the freedom to write what I want to write. So that's the beauty of having my own press. That would fall into the category that some people would say the self-publishing category. I don't see that as a negative thing. I see that as a form of empowerment, because I get to have power over my work. And if people want to see it as less than, that I'm not part of a big traditional publishing firm, that I don't have an agent, that I'm not with an academic press, they can see it the way they want to see it. But I see this whole journey in terms of Planet Earth Press as a form of empowerment.
Lydia, where can people get a copy of the book?
The book is online, available at all online vendors. I would suggest bookstore.org because they give some money back to individual bookstores. But you can get it on Amazon, places like that. After Monday, you can get it everywhere. It's also available in bookstores in Los Angeles, independent bookstores, Tia Chucha's, Olivia's Bookshop, and Sky Books on Vermont. You can look for it there. I think those are the 3 coolest bookstores in Los Angeles myself. So yeah, try to support those bookstores. It's going to be available in Tucson after next week. So most bookstores here in Tucson will carry it. I got an email from Barnes & Noble saying they didn't want to carry it. So don't expect this type of book to be at a Barnes & Noble. I don't take that as, I'm not crushed by that. I didn't expect my book to be at Barnes & Noble. What I'm impressed by is that Tia Chucha's and Olivia's bookshelf is carrying my book. Those are cool places. So I'm excited about that.
Yeah, those are great bookstores.
Aren't they? Yeah.
Well, I do want to mention once again, LA Interchanges, a Brown queer archival memoir, is scheduled to be released July 30th. So that's where you can get it. And for updates, you can go to lydiaotero.com. Well, thank you, Lydia. You are one of our guests, but you're also part of our show too. It's great to get to know more about you, and I can hardly wait to read your book.
Yeah, thanks, Rita. And thank you all for being part of this journey. And you're all in the book in some form of another. Yes, Rita, I do include the time where you pushed me off the couch and I broke my hand.
Oh, that's the part I didn't want. But anyway, thanks very much. I'm Rita Gonzales.
I'm Eduardo Archuleta.
I'm Mario J. Novoa.
And I'm Lydia Otero.
Once again, you've been listening to Radio QGLLU. Thanks for listening to The Out Agenda, and we do want to hear from you. Like us on our Facebook page, follow us on Twitter, or email us at theoutagenda@gmail.com. And have a wonderful week. And remember that being out is the first step to being equal. Now stay tuned for This Way Out.